long before anyone dared attach a name to the presence that lurked around the Poplick trestle. There were the sounds. They began subtly, too subtle for anyone to take seriously at first. Farmers tending their crops in the fading orange light of dusk would pause mid-stride, their ears twitching toward the ravine as if something behind them had whispered. But the moment they turned, the fields were silent again, still except for the chirping of crickets and the distant bark of a lone dog. Then, in the early spring months, the murmur changed. The locals described it as a low, crawling vibration, deep enough to be felt in their teeth more than heard in their ears. It seemed to come from beneath the old steel trestle, like the groan of a creature awakening from a decades-long sleep. Some said it reminded them of a heartbeat, slow, heavy, deliberate. Others claimed it pulsed like the rumble of an approaching train, even when the tracks remained empty and still. One evening, a man named Howard Fielding, who lived on a small farmhouse overlooking the creek, was closing his barn when the vibration flared unexpectedly. It rose from a faint hum to a deep tremor that made the windows shudder in their frames. His cattle panicked instantly, kicking, bellowing, slamming into their wooden enclosures as if fleeing an invisible predator. Howard himself felt a sudden wave of dizziness, the kind that makes the world tilt slightly off balance. As though gravity had shifted beneath his feet, he rushed outside, half expecting to see a freight locomotive barreling across the trestle. But no train came. No engine roared. The bridge loomed quiet and skeletal against the sky, the metal rails catching the moonlight like the ribs of a long-dead beast. Yet the vibration continued, soft now, but unmistakable. Howard never forgot that sensation. He later admitted, in a shaky interview recorded years after the event, that it felt almost like something was calling to him, not with words, not with sound, but with a pull, a subtle urge toward the trestle that he had to physically resist. He wasn't the only one. Teenagers hanging out near the abandoned paths reported sudden headaches and moments of confusion, moments where they would blink and find themselves standing closer to the tracks than they remembered. Even experienced hikers occasionally spoke of losing their sense of direction near the ravine, as if their own thoughts were being nudged or tampered with by an unseen presence. Some dismissed it as superstition. Others blamed it on geological shifts or the natural acoustics of the steel bridge. But a small number of residents knew or believed something far stranger was responsible, because the vibration felt less like a sound and more like a warning, or perhaps an invitation. The vibrations were only the beginning. That as the years passed, nighttime wanderers began reporting something even more unsettling. A figure watching from the trees. The first sighting came from a railroad maintenance worker named Samuel Price. One evening, while repairing a section of warp track near the western end of the trestle, he noticed someone standing at the timberline, perfectly motionless. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall, and stood with its back straight, as if posed deliberately. Samuel called out, assuming it was a curious locale, but the figure did not respond. It remained still, almost rigid, as though carved from the shadows themselves. He raised his lantern, letting its warm light wash across the trees. For a brief moment, the figure's outline sharpened, long limbs, narrow shoulders, and a posture too stiff to belong to any ordinary person. But before the light fully touched it, the shape slipped behind a tree with unnerving fluidity, vanishing without sound. Samuel tried to laugh it off later, but his voice trembled when he said one unsettling sentence: it was standing too still, like it wasn't used to pretending to be human. More sightings followed. A group of local teenagers claimed they saw a silhouette crouched high on the steel supports underneath the trestle, clinging to the metal like a creature born in the dark. They described its limbs as long and bent in a way that made their skin crawl simply to remember. When their flashlight beam passed over it, the figure retreated with startling speed, not toward the woods, but deeper along the length of the bridge. Hunters in the area later spoke of a silent watcher, a markedly tall figure with an unnatural stillness. They swore its eyes reflected light with a pale, sickly gleam, like the eyes of a goat caught in headlights, except it stood upright, on two legs. One hunter, a man who prided himself on never being frightened by the wilderness, confessed that the figure's presence was so intense, so profoundly wrong, that he couldn't bring himself to return to the ravine for months. He summed it up simply: it was studying us, not attacking, not stalking, studying, as though learning the movements of the humans who trespassed into its territory, as though waiting for something. The earliest known confrontation between humans and the creature took place on a cool autumn evening, when two brothers, Eli and Warren Dalton, ventured toward the ravine in search of their missing dog, Jasper. Jasper had fled into the woods after barking uncontrollably at something near the trestle. The boys heard his yelps echo across the ravine but could not pinpoint his location. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long spears of black shadow across the forest, they reluctantly followed the noise toward the base of the steel bridge. Eli later recalled that the air felt wrong, unnaturally still, unnaturally cold. When they reached the trestle's shadow, a sudden metallic clang rang out above them. It wasn't the thunderous roar of a train. It sounded more like a footstep, a single, precise step placed upon the rails with deliberate force. Slowly, they looked up. There, silhouetted against the fading sky, stood a hunched figure. Its back arched like a malformed spine, its limbs long and angular. It paced along the bridge with an eerie grace, its movements too smooth, too controlled. Despite walking on metal, it made no sound beyond that first unnatural clang. The boys froze. The figure paused, and then it turned toward them. Eli swore, its head tilted in a jerking, animalistic motion, like a goat adjusting its stance, except it towered on two legs. Not for a cold, electric dread surged through the brothers. Without thinking, they ran. Branches whipped their faces as they sprinted toward the open fields, their breaths ragged and shallow. But as they fled, Warren risked a glance back, and that was when he saw the creature descending the trestle supports, not like a human climbing, but like a creature adapted to steel, moving with impossible precision across beams and rivets, not chasing with footsteps, sliding, gliding, descending with disturbing elegance. The boys reached the safety of the fields just as the creature melted back into the shadows of the trestles. Underbelly. Jasper, their loyal dog, was never found, and neither brother ever again approached the ravine after dark. The thing beneath the bridge ***. Marcus tried to steady his breath as the shadow beneath the trestle swelled like a slow, awakening heartbeat, its edges rippling as though it were made of smoke soaked in oil, and every instinct in him begged to run, yet his legs locked as if the air around him had thickened into syrup. The forest behind him felt miles away now, distant and unreachable, the trees stretching taller, their branches twisting as if craning to watch what was about to happen. The monstrous voice drifted out again, low, ancient, layered with echoes, as if spoken by many throats at once, vibrating the metal beams overhead and sending tiny pebbles raining from the tracks. Marcus stepped backward, but the ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet, warm like there was something just under the soil, crawling upward. A cold wind spiraled around him, although the air had been still moments before, carrying the stench of damp fur, burned metal, and something else, something sweet and rotten like fruit left in the sun too long. The shadow rose higher, reshaping itself with agonizing slowness, until a massive silhouette formed, horns first, then shoulders broad enough to blot out the remaining sliver of morning light, and legs too long and wrong to belong to any earthly animal. Marcus felt the world bending, the air tilting, the sky's colors draining into washed-out gray as though reality itself recoiled from the creature taking shape. A deep tremor crawled across the ground, subtle at first, then strong enough to rattle the trestle bolts, and Marcus realized the vibration matched the rhythm he'd felt earlier. The hum that had synced with his heartbeat, only now it was stronger, overwhelming, an invasive force pushing into his chest like invisible fingers squeezing his lungs. He forced himself to step back again, boots sinking into the soft earth, but the shadow creature moved with him, its massive head lowering, its eyes still hidden in the dark except for faint glimmers, the smoldering embers that flickered like dying coals. Then, impossibly, it spoke his name, not shouted, not whispered, but delivered into his mind, bypassing sound entirely. A cold voice unfurling inside his skull. Marcus, you saw him, you touched his fear, you carry the scent of the runaway. The runaway, the smaller creature from before, the one that had warned him. Marcus felt a surge of panic, and the shadow stepped forward, revealing for the first time the full shape of its legs, hoofed and bent at unnatural angles, each step leaving smoking impressions in the ground. The trestle above groaned violently, metal twisting as if dragged by invisible chains, and the creature's voice growled again inside Marcus's mind. Return him, or be taken in his place. The air snapped with a sound like brittle bones breaking, and the shadow surged forward faster than anything that size should move, forcing Marcus to turn and run blindly into the woods, branches clawing at his face, roots grasping at his feet, the ground pulsing with every thunderous step of the thing that hunted him beneath the bridge. The thing beneath the bridge ***. Marcus tried to steady his breath as the shadow beneath the trestle swelled like a slow, awakening heartbeat, its edges rippling as though it were made of smoke soaked in oil, and every instinct in him begged to run, yet his legs locked as if the air around him had thickened into syrup. The forest behind him felt miles away now, distant and unreachable, the trees stretching taller, their branches twisting as if craning to watch what was about to happen. The monstrous voice drifted out again, low, ancient, layered with echoes, as if spoken by many throats at once, vibrating the metal beams overhead and sending tiny pebbles raining from the tracks. Marcus stepped backward, but the ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet, warm like there was something just under the soil, crawling upward. A cold wind spiraled around him, although the air had been still moments before, carrying the stench of damp fur, burned metal, and something else, something sweet and rotten like fruit left in the sun too long. The shadow rose higher, reshaping itself with agonizing slowness, until a massive silhouette formed, horns first, then shoulders broad enough to blot out the remaining sliver of morning light, and legs too long and wrong to belong to any earthly animal. Marcus felt the world bending, the air tilting, the sky's colors draining into washed-out gray as though reality itself recoiled from the creature taking shape. A deep tremor crawled across the ground, subtle at first, then strong enough to rattle the trestle bolts, and Marcus realized the vibration matched the rhythm he'd felt earlier. The hum that had synced with his heartbeat, only now it was stronger, overwhelming, an invasive force pushing into his chest like invisible fingers squeezing his lungs. He forced himself to step back again, boots sinking into the soft earth, but the shadow creature moved with him, its massive head lowering, its eyes still hidden in the dark except for two faint glimmers, dim, smoldering embers that flickered like dying coals. Then, impossibly, it spoke his name, not shouted, not whispered, but delivered into his mind, bypassing sound entirely. A cold voice unfurling inside his skull. Marcus, you saw him, you touched his fear, you carry the scent of the runaway. The runaway, the smaller creature from before, the one that had warned him. Marcus felt a surge of panic, and the shadow stepped forward, revealing for the first time the full shape of its legs, hoofed and bent at unnatural angles, each step leaving smoking impressions in the ground. The trestle above groaned violently, metal twisting as if dragged by invisible chains, and the creature's voice growled again inside Marcus's mind. Return him, or be taken in his place. The air snapped with a sound like brittle bones breaking, and the shadows surged forward faster than anything that size should move, forcing Marcus to turn and run blindly into the woods. Branches clawing at his face, roots grasping at his feet, the ground pulsing with every thunderous step of the thing that hunted him beneath the bridge. The whispers in the woods, ***, Marcus ran without direction, crashing through branches and thorns as if the entire forest were collapsing inward around him, every breath slicing his lungs with icy needles. Yet the pounding behind him never faded, it matched him step for step. A heavy, rhythmic thud, like the heartbeat of something colossal. The trees seemed to twist as he passed, their trunks narrowing and widening in impossible ways, their shadows reaching across the ground like long black fingers trying to snag his clothes. He felt the creature's presence pressing into his back, not physically but mentally, like a cold thumb pushing against the center of his mind, spreading whispers that slithered through his thoughts. You cannot hide. The runaway belongs to us. Return him. The words wrapped around his skull like a tightening rope, each whisper sinking deeper, scratching at the edges of his sanity. Marcus stumbled over a fallen log, hit the ground hard, and slid into a patch of dead leaves where a strange humming sound vibrated beneath him, faint at first, then growing louder until the whole forest seemed to pulse with it. He pushed himself up, dizzy, and realized the trees around him were swaying, not from wind but from something deeper, something moving far below the soil as though massive roots or claws were dragging themselves closer. The light between the trees flickered unnaturally, day dimming to dusk for a moment before snapping back to morning, as if time itself wavered in the creature's presence. Marcus looked back and saw, for a split second, the towering silhouette moving between the trunks, its horns scraping the branches, its hooves leaving glowing impressions in the dirt, its long limbs bending like broken marionette strings. Panic surged through him as the forest filled with an awful chorus of whispers, some sounding like the creature, some like children, some like voices he recognized from home. They overlapped, calling his name, urging him to stop, promising safety if he turned around. Marcus, this way please, don't run. But he knew none of those voices were real. There were bait, lures cast into his mind by the creature that stalked him. He shoved forward, breaking into a clearing he didn't recognize, a circle of flattened grass where the air felt colder, heavier, as if this place had been used for rituals older than the trestle itself. In the center lay a torn piece of cloth caught on a broken stump cloth from the runaway creature he had touched earlier. Marcus froze as the humming beneath the ground intensified, the soil cracking open in tiny fractures that glowed faintly with dull, pulsing light. The whispers grew sharper, angrier, filling his head until he screamed and tried to drown them out. And then, everything stopped. The forest went silent. The whispers vanished in an instant. Marcus slowly turned, terrified of what he might see behind him, and his heart nearly stopped. Standing at the edge of the clearing, shivering, bleeding, eyes wide with terror, was the runaway creature itself, staring at him as though he was the only thing in the world left that could save it. The runaway's warning ****. For several long seconds, Marcus and the trembling runaway creature stared at one another, both frozen by terror, the clearing so silent it felt as though the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Marcus could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears like distant drums, so loud he wondered if the creature could hear it too. The small figure, half boy, half goat, covered in scratches and caked mud, took a hesitant step toward him, its thin legs shaking violently, its yellow eyes wide with an emotion Marcus had never seen in anything from the Poplick woods, pure desperation. The forest around them seemed to lean inward, branches creaking overhead like bones shifting in an ancient tomb as the glowing cracks in the soil pulsed darker, slower, almost as if recognizing the runaway's presence. Marcus swallowed hard, unsure whether to back away or move closer. But the creature lifted a trembling hand and pointed behind him, its lips parting to speak, though its voice came out not as sound but as a soft vibration in the air. "It's coming. It followed me. It knows you touched me." The words weren't spoken, yet Marcus heard them inside his head, ringing like a warning bell. Instinct prickled up his spine. He turned slightly, listening. The woods were silent, unnaturally silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skull, screaming that something enormous is standing just out of sight. Marcus whispered, "What followed you? What is it?" The creature shook its head violently, backing away, fear pouring off it like heat. Not name, not speak, or it hear everything. Marcus felt the ground vibrate faintly beneath his shoes, a deep tremor spreading outward as if something massive were walking toward them slowly, deliberately, savoring each step. Panic tightened Marcus's chest. He reached out instinctively for the runaway creature, but it flinched, shaking its small head again. "No touch. It mark you more. It make you like me." The words chilled Marcus's blood. He noticed then the strange pattern burned into the creature's arm, a spiraling mark that pulsed faintly with the same glow as the cracks in the soil. Marcus hadn't seen it before. The creature must have been hiding it. But now, in the clearing's sickly light, the mark looked like an infection made of shadow and flame, writhing just beneath the skin. He staggered back, horrified, but the creature only stepped closer, voice trembling as it forced more thoughts into Marcus's mind. "It make you run. It make you lonely. It make you smell like fear. Then it hunt you forever." Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to scream for help, but he knew the forest would swallow his voice as easily as it had swallowed everyone else. The trembling creature glanced over Marcus's shoulder suddenly, its eyes widening, pupils dilating into black pits of terror. The soil around them cracked louder. The air thickened. The shadows behind the trees lengthened and twitched. And the runaway creature whispered one final thought, one that made Marcus's stomach drop and his skin go cold. "It already here." The thing behind the trees, ***. Marcus didn't want to turn around, not really. Not at all, but the air grew so cold so fast that frost crackled across the leaves at his feet, crawling outward like pale fingers. And he felt the presence behind him in the way a drowning man feels the weight of the ocean closing over his head. Absolute, inescapable, crushing. His breath fogged instantly, spilling from his mouth in ragged plumes as he forced himself to turn just enough to glimpse over his shoulder. At first he saw nothing but darkness layered between the trunks of the pines, shadows stacked on shadows. But then the shadows shifted, not quickly, not like an animal but slowly, like something waking up, something long, something tall, something ancient. The runaway creature beside him fell to its knees, covering its face with its clawed hands. Shaking so violently Marcus felt the tremors through the ground. A deep groaning sound rippled through the trees, not like a growl but like wooden beams bending under impossible weight, like something enormous dragging itself through the forest without hurry, without fear, without the smallest need to hide. Marcus's stomach lurched. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to obey. The trees shook overhead. Pine needles rained down like cold, sharp ash. A sliver of the thing finally slid into view, a leg too thin, too long, bent the wrong width, surface crawling like it was made of shifting bark or living roots. And then came the smell-wet soil, decay, and something metallic, like hot iron pressed against skin. Marcus gagged, stumbling backward, but the creature's voice, the one in his head, stabbed through his panic. No run. It chase, it loved chase. Marcus grabbed the small creature's arm anyway, desperate, pulling it toward the direction of the trail. But the mark on its skin flashed, burning bright enough to sear a glow across Marcus's face. At that exact moment, the enormous figure behind the trees inhaled, not through lungs, through the entire forest. The sound was like every branch bending inward at once. A suction, a gathering, a claiming. Marcus felt his vision blur and his balance tilt, as though the earth itself was leaning toward the thing. The runaway creature screamed without sound, a psychic cry that ripped through Marcus's mind like broken glass. The trees bulged as the entity pressed forward, its form still half hidden but impossibly huge, its limbs scraping against bark, leaving black, steaming streaks behind. Marcus forced himself to move, dragging the creature with him as the ground pulsed beneath him like a heartbeat. A second inhale, louder, hungrier, shook the forest floor. The shadows stretched like tendrils reaching for Marcus's ankles. He stumbled, nearly falling, but the creature pushed him from behind with surprising strength and projected a final thought with every ounce of its remaining will. Bridge tracks go, only place it slow. Marcus didn't understand why. He didn't need to. He just ran as though the whole forest were collapsing behind him, never daring to look back as something impossibly large slid fully into the clearing, its presence swelling through the trees like a nightmare taking its first real breath. The trestle loomed above Jacob like an ancient monument built for something far older and far darker than human travel, its rusted-tin beams stretching into the night like the skeletal remains of a forgotten titan. And as he climbed the embankment toward it, every instinct inside him screamed to turn back, yet an unnatural, pulsing thing called, commanding. An impossibly persuasive kept urging him forward. The wind had died completely, leaving the night disturbingly still, and the silence was so profound it felt as though the world itself had paused to watch him trespass on cursed ground. His breath puffed in shallow bursts as he stepped onto the wooden planks, each one creaking beneath his weight with a hollow, decayed echo that traveled far into the blackness below. The scent of iron filled the air, strong enough to sting his nose. And for a terrifying moment Jacob wondered if the smell was old rust or fresh blood. Halfway across the trestle, he felt it again, that psychological pressure, like invisible hands pressing lightly against his temples, guiding his thoughts, whispering to his mind, bending his fear into obedience. Shadows gathered at the far end, swirling in unnatural shapes that contorted and reformed like ink drifting through water. And within that shifting darkness, a pair of long jointed limbs emerged, followed by a set of backward bent legs that clicked against the wooden beam as though the creature's bones were grinding against each other with each deliberate step. Jacob froze, unable to move, unable to breathe, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed him as the creature's silhouette fully materialized, its tall, gaunt frame crowned by twisted horns, its pale eyes burning with hypnotic intent, its voice sliding into his skull in a whisper that was not spoken by a throat but felt directly in the mind. Come closer. Look down, and Jacob, despite every survival instinct clawing at his soul, that felt himself taking one step forward toward the deadly drop beneath the trestle, realizing with dawning horror that the Popelic creature didn't just manipulate fear, it controlled the will itself. As the Popelic legend grew, folklorists and cryptid researchers began comparing it to older myths, stories that long predated the steel trestle. Many noticed a disturbing pattern. Creatures resembling Hoffman, half-goat beings appear in ancient cultures across the globe. In Greek mythology, satyrs and fauns were forest dwellers who lured travelers astray with hypnotic music and intoxicating voices. But older, darker descriptions painted them not as playful spirits, but as territorial guardians who punished those who trespassed into sacred ground. Some researchers suggest that the Popelic creature may not be a modern monster at all, but an ancient archetype wearing a new mask, a lingering echo of something the human mind has always feared. One anthropologist, Dr. Elliot Merrow, pointed out something chilling. In almost every culture, goat-like entities are portrayed as boundary keepers. They stand between the natural and the supernatural, between safety and death. They appear where the world is thin, cliffs, ravines, abandoned forests, and places where humans do not belong. The Popelic trestle, stretching across a deep, narrow gorge, fits this description perfectly. Some believe the creature is older than the bridge itself, simply adapting to the new territory built above its home. In this theory, the creature is not a monster. It is a sentinel, one that never asked for humanity to build a railroad through its domain. Another theory proposes an origin far more modern and far more unsettling. During the 1940s, local newspapers reported a freight train derailment near the outskirts of Kentucky. Officially, the cause was listed as mechanical failure. Unofficially, locals whispered of cargo that was quickly seized, sealed, and removed by federal agents. The train had allegedly carried a traveling circus or something pretending to be one. According to this version, the train was rumored to contain exotic animals, malformed creatures, and displays from so-called freak shows. Survivors claimed the cargo included a being unlike anything they had seen before, a horned, goat-like humanoid bound in iron restraints and kept sedated in a reinforced cage. Some say it was no performer at all, but the result of genetic experiments, a creature designed for endurance, strength, or obedience, a living test subject nobody was meant to see. When the train derailed, chaos erupted in the ravine. Several animals escaped, and several never resurfaced. Locals later reported sightings of something prowling the tree line in the months that followed, thin, starving, wounded but alive. A creature learning to navigate its new environment. A creature abandoned by the world that created it. The theory suggests the Popelic monster is not supernatural but man-made, a living relic of human cruelty. And the whispers people hear are not hypnotic powers, but the desperate instincts of a creature trained to obey commands long forgotten. If true, the trestle does not harbor a demon. It harbors a mistake. A rare, quieter theory offers a shocking reversal. What if the creature isn't trying to lure people onto the tracks, but trying to keep them away? In this telling, the Popelic monster is a protector, a sentinel bound to the trestle for reasons unknown. Those who trespass near the bridge often speak of overwhelming dread, sudden headaches, or invisible pressure urging them to turn back. But what if these sensations are warnings, not traps? Every year, people die on the trestle, struck by trains that cannot stop in time. Could the creature be attempting to frighten intruders away from certain death? Could the whispers people hear their names spoken softly in the dark be a desperate attempt to pull them back from danger? One local woman, June Carver, claimed she heard a voice telling her to go home moments before she stepped onto the bridge. She stumbled backward, dizzy and frightened, and seconds later a train roared past, so close the air alone could have thrown her off the rails. She believed the creature saved her life. Some researchers propose the creature is bound to the structure itself, perhaps spiritually or territorially. It patrols the bridge because it must. It warns because it is compelled to. In this version of events, the creature is not evil, not malicious, simply misunderstood. But even a guardian can become dangerous if provoked, and trespassers rarely understand the difference between a warning and a threat. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Those who encounter the creature at the trestle never forget the feeling, that overwhelming sense of being watched by something ancient, powerful, and deeply aware. Jacob and Marla stood frozen in the underground chamber, their breaths shallow in the stale, musty air. The totem's grotesque visage seemed to watch them with hollow eyes, its twisted smile mocking their intrusion. Every instinct screamed at them to flee, but they knew they had to uncover the truth no matter the cost. A faint scuffling noise echoed from deeper within the darkness. The creature's growl was closer now, more menacing, almost like a warning. Turn back or perish. Jacob steadied his voice. We need to find out what it's protecting. Marla nodded, gripping her flashlight like a weapon. Together, they pressed forward, their beams cutting through the blackness. The walls narrowed, dripping with cold water that fell in irregular patterns, each drop resonating like distant thunder dot as they rounded a bend. The passage opened into a wider cavern, lit faintly by eerie phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls. At the center stood a rusted metal cage, its bars bent and broken. Inside, something small and shivering stirred a figure, gaunt and pale, eyes wide with terror. It's a person. Marla gasped. The captive's lips trembled. You have to leave. It's not safe here. Before they could respond, a deafening roar shook the cavern. The creature burst from the shadows, towering and terrifying, eyes blazing with fury. Its inhuman limbs clawed the air as it charged forward. Jacob and Marla braced themselves, caught between the creature's wrath and the desperate hope of saving the captive. The final battle for survival at Public Creek had begun. The cavern shook as the creature lunged, its massive claws slicing through the stale air with deadly precision. Jacob instinctively raised his flashlight, aiming its beam directly into the monster's fiery eyes. The creature recoiled, a furious snarl ripping from its throat. Marla grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the floor, a broken rail spike, and steadied herself. We have to keep it distracted, she shouted. The captive, trembling inside the cage, called out weakly, there's a trapdoor behind the altar. Use it. Jacob's eyes darted to the ancient totem in the center, then to a creaking wooden platform hidden beneath layers of dust and bones. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward it, with Marla right behind him. The creature roared again, pursuing them with terrifying speed. Despite its bulk, its twisted limbs crashed against the cavern walls, sending debris flying. Marla swung the rail spike, striking its arm and buying precious seconds. Jacob yanked open the trapdoor, revealing a narrow shaft descending into darkness. Get inside, he yelled to the captive, who hurried through the opening. With a final glance at Marla, Jacob jumped down after the captive. The trapdoor slammed shut just as the creature's furious claws scraped the edge. Desperate to reach them, the shaft plunged deep underground, the air growing colder and thicker with each step. They didn't know what awaited them below, but escape was their only chance. Behind them, the creature's roar echoed, fading but never far away, a chilling reminder that the nightmare of Public Creek was far from over. The narrow shaft plunged deeper into the earth, swallowing Jacob, Marla, and the captive into a suffocating darkness. Their breaths echoed off the cold stone walls as they hurried downward, hearts pounding with desperation. Above, the angry roar of the creature faded into a distant growl, unable to follow them into the tight, winding passage. But the weight of fear pressed on them heavily. Escape was only the first step at last. The shaft opened into a hidden cave where faint daylight spilled through cracks in the rock. They stumbled out into the fresh air, gasping with relief and disbelief. We made it, the captive whispered, voice hoarse but grateful. Jacob looked back toward the shadowed entrance below the trestle. It's been protecting this place for decades, guarding secrets too terrible to be told. Marla shivered. Maybe some legends are true for a reason. As they emerged from the forest, the first rays of dawn painted the sky a cold, pale pink. The creature of Public Creek vanished back into the shadows of myth and nightmare, at least for now, but the chilling truth lingered in their minds. Some darkness is eternal, and some stories refuse to end.